Hey, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. I can almost talk this week. We'll see how it goes. So it's fucking almost Halloween. By the time you watch this, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be after Halloween. But that doesn't matter because not that many people have spooky things to read. So it's going to be a very conventional, I think, Misery Loves Company for the most part tonight. And since there are dogs screaming in the background, I'm going to move to our first reader as quickly as fucking possible. First up tonight is John.
Hello.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Hi.
So this is your
Well,
first time reading on Misery Loves Company, right?
Yeah, first time reading period really.
Cool.
cool.
So
Welcome.
thanks. I've been to this a couple times, so I don't know. I'll try to make it quick. It's kind of a long
But
story. So
before you get started, John, I was just wondering, William, do you want me to tackle the Twitter?
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, if you want to
Okay.
handle the Twitter feed,
Gotcha.
that'd be great. So,
all
John,
right.
it's all yours.
All right, and I just want to thank you again for letting me read.
Yeah, thanks for reading.
All right. The interrogation room smelled terrible, and neither the suspect nor the detective wanted to admit that they peed themselves a little. The detective, Rodney, was overworked and didn't have time to change. The suspect, Owen, had a blatant disregard for hygiene and took a secret pride in staying underwear. Rodney was a thin guy who always looked dead and sweaty, who wore a detective jacket and matching khakis. All right, kid, walk me through what happened last night. He was sweating through his shirt while the suspect, Owen, shivered small in his chair. Police Chief Francis crouched hidden in the corner. His hat and uniform used to belong to a much larger man, but he didn't mind the bigness. He liked the roominess, even if his hat sometimes drooped over his eyes. The chief had a particular interest in certain crimes as of late, so he would hide in little spaces in the interrogation room and spy on the detectives, even though he didn't have to. Owen had his arms wrapped around himself. I don't have to say shit to you. Rodney dripped over the table. Why were you walking down Buno at 2 a.m.? The kid just sat there shaking his head. I know what you did. The detective walked over to Owen's side of the table. All the evidence is right there on your little rat face. He put an arm down on the table, got real close to Owen. You might as well tell me now. Make things easier on yourself. Owen spit on him. The detective grabbed a fistful of tissues and wiped a loogie off his face. He plopped the pile on the table in front of Owen. You're going to eat that. You can't make me. You know, kid? Rodney lifted a 38 special out of his pocket. I have a bit of a second sight when it comes. I have a bit of a second sight. That's what makes me such a good detective. Right now, I'm getting a feeling that if you don't start eating that pile of snot, well, maybe I'd have to shoot you for my own protection. He stared down the kid, then lightened up. Your choice, though. After a moment of glaring at each other, Owen started picking at the lump of tissues, putting pinch after pinch in his mouth. Good, said Rodney. He took his seat across from Owen and made sure his gun was always visible. I'm going to show you some things, ask you some questions. Owen picked around the pile, trying to avoid the spit. That looks dry, doesn't it? And the detective hucked into the pile. He gave Owen a smile. There you go. Anyway, Rodney put some pictures on the table. You recognize this body? Owen winced at a particularly wet tissue he was chewing on, but he didn't answer. Well, you should. It's the body of the kid we found you dragging. He held up a bag containing a bloodied knife. You recognize this? It's the knife we took off you. Blade matches the cuts on him. Same blood. Owen chewed. You see, kid, it doesn't matter if you talk or not. You're fucked. No jury in the world's going to give you anything less than the electric chair. Owen gagged on a semi-solid booger and accidentally let out a whimper. Rodney laughed. Then the chief hopped off his haunches, bounced over, and popped himself on the table. Good work, detective. But if you don't mind, I have a couple questions to ask the kid. Rodney and Owen both had the same reaction to this chipper little man who sprang up out of the corner. They looked at him wide-eyed. Go ahead, Chief, said Rodney. The chief nodded, then turned to Owen with a smile. Hello, son. We picked you up off of Buno Road, right? Yeah, that's right. And when you were on Buno, did you feel something creepy, like you weren't alone? Owen leaned over to look at Rodney. Rodney shook his head and shrugged. It was creepy, sure. I don't know, maybe there was a presence there? The chief sprang up, snapped his fingers, and paced around the room. Can you describe this presence? What was it like? Strange, I guess. Yes, good. What else? creepy. The chief kept nodding at Owen. Yeah, it was really strange and creepy. It was like a very strange creeping thing, I guess, like something very creepy and sort of. The chief narrowed his eyes. Frog-like? Uh, yeah, sure. The chief turned his back on Owen, but spoke loud enough to fill the whole room. My God. He turned to the detective. He's free to go. What? Owen ran out of the room. Rodney approached the chief. What are you doing? I knew it, he said to himself. He turned around and grabbed the detective by both shoulders, rocked him hard with fear. I knew it, Rodney. Frogman. Squad cars flooded Buno Road. They blocked every exit, every intersection. Teams of trackers combed through the vast woods that surrounded the road. Each cop was specially outfitted with salt packets, extra bullets, and an extra large bug net. The chief was cruising down Buno when he drove up on a scene. 2 cars pulled up on the side, sirens on. He pulled over. What's going on, boys? We found this kid messing around in the woods. Standing between the officers was Owen. He was covered in blood and dirt. We found him with his shovel standing by some open graves. There were 3 dead bodies in those graves, sir. The chief rubbed his forehead like he was trying to peel it off. My God, he's struck again. Then he went over to and patted Owen on the back. Good job digging up those bodies, kid. Let me give you a ride to the station. It's a dangerous place out here. Thank you, sir. And Owen sat passenger while they tore it down Buno. Rodney sipped coffee when 2 junior deputies came scrambling into the station. Rodney, aren't you supposed to be out looking? Looking for what? The deputies looked at each other. Well, for Frogman, who else? Jesus Christ, are you too serious? Owen walked past the detective. Evening, bitch. Oh, Jesus Christ, why are you in jail? What? Said Owen. For what? You're covered in blood. You've been killing people. Owen popped open the door and hung in the doorway just long enough to say, it's that Frogman that's been killing everyone, dipshit. And then he slammed the door behind him. Rodney pinched his nose. The deputies stood and watched the detective until one piped up. So, you're going to help look, right? Because you really haven't been pulling your weight on this. The detective didn't even look at him. He turned around and walked straight to the chief's office. On the left side of Chief Francis's office was a brick fireplace. He kept all his little trinkets on its mantle. Group photos, awards, and a big stick he found in the woods once. It was at this fireplace that Detective Rodney found the chief hunched over when he slammed in his office door. Sir, you need to call off this search. It's just silly. The chief didn't look. He kept hunched over the fireplace, throwing in little papers and baggies into the fire, watching it flare and die, flare and die. Chief, did you hear me? The chief didn't acknowledge him. Something caught the detective's eye, a bloodied rag in a bag. The chief tossed it in the fire. Rodney ran up and tried to dig it out, but it was already engulfed. Are you burning evidence? The chief turned from the fire, eyes deep in his head. Maybe I just see the good in people, Rodney. Doesn't matter anyway. We both know it's no good. What the hell are you talking about? It's all false leads, Rodney. We have our man, Frogman. We just have to find him. Rodney glared at the chief. That Owen kid is the murderer. It's really obvious. What? No. The chief shook his head, jumped up and towered over Rodney despite being 6 inches shorter. Are you too blind to not see it? He pushed the detective across the room with the sheer force of his voice. He's a good kid, not a killer. Why would he be? He has no reason to. No, it's Frogman. The chief spun around and knocked everything off his own desk. Frogman! Will you get a hold of yourself? There's no such thing as a damn Frogman. The chief turned around, gave Rodney a shifty look. Aren't you supposed to be out looking for him? Why are you here? I'm not looking for a frog. You're being a moron. The chief shouted up at him. I'm a moron. You're the one sitting on your ass while there's a murderer on the loose. Rodney grabbed the chief by the collar. Listen, you idiot. I don't care what you think. You got everyone all panicked and you're wasting everyone's time. There's no such thing as a fucking Frogman. The door slammed open. In burst a young officer with just enough breath to push out words. Sir, we found him. They both looked at him with open eyes and open mouths. Rodney's hands let go. The chief brushed himself off. Take me to him, now. Where'd you find him? Hiding in a drainage ditch, sir. The young officer, the detective, and the chief were walking around a holding cell. In that holding cell was a cage, and in that cage was a frog cuffed to the bars by his neck. The frog was about the size of a loaf of bread. He barely fit in the cage, but it wasn't a very big cage to begin with. God, he's massive, said the chief. He put up one hell of a fight. Billy took a bullet to the shoulder. Rodney sipped his coffee. That frog shot Billy? Well, no. Williams misfired, said he was startled. Said Rodney. He sipped more coffee. The chief held the bars, watched the frog closely. The frogman is a master manipulator. Fear is his specialty. He slapped the officer on the back. Good work, son. Go home and get some rest. Thank you, sir. Then it was just the chief and the detective. Rodney, you're a damn fine detective, but I want to question this thing myself. Rodney let out a sigh. Whatever, I don't care. And he walked over to the far side of the room. The chief circled the frog for minutes, not saying anything. 10 laps around, then he grabbed the bars, took a deep breath, coughed, then sprang into it. Why'd you do it, frogman? With a reptilian coldness, the frog didn't say anything. Don't you give me that load of malarkey. We both know what you've been up to. The frog croaked. Huh, you think you're pretty smart, huh? The chief took out a nightstick, ran it along the bars of the cell. Listen here, Froggy. You're not in your little pond anymore. You're in my house. The frog jumped. His cage leapt forward with him. The chief jumped, took cover behind Rodney. He drew his gun. I'm not playing games, Froggy. I'll blow your ass to hell. A cop walked in and the chief fired a shot that sent the officer's hat spinning like a record. It stopped with the brim over his eyes. Sir? Sorry, son, you startled me. What is it? A report from Buno Road. Another body turned up, fresh. We estimate they were killed within the past 20 minutes. The chief rubbed his chin with his gun. 20 minutes. When did we get this frog into custody? About 45 minutes ago, sir. He threw his gun on the floor like a baseball cap. It went off and shot right through Rodney's mug. The chief turned to Rodney. Do you know what this means? Rodney grabbed a handful of napkins and tried wiping the exploded coffee off him. Yes, chief, I know exactly what this means. The officer piped in. Sir, we have a kid named Owen in custody. He was on the scene when we found the body. In fact, it was actually his brother's body that we found. Should we question him? Poor fella. It's rough to lose a brother. No, let him go. Rodney stopped wiping himself. What? He turned, spoke low to himself, eyes on the frog. It's even worse than I could have imagined. The chief looked up, spoke loud enough to fill the entire station. It looks like Frogman has resorted to using voodoo magic to telepathically kill his victims. Rodney threw his wet clump of napkins on the ground. Instead of arguing, he just put his head in his hands. I'm not excited about it either, Rodney. We'll have to go to the higher ups for this one. The way higher ups. The station was nearly empty when the man in the suit came knocking. The chief opened the door. The man pulled out a badge. Norm Gaff, FBI. You're Chief Francis, I presume? I understand you have a psychoactive frog? Yes. Nice to meet you, Mr. Gaff. And the chief stuck out his hand. The agent hesitated, but ended up shaking it. He noticed the agent's hand was a bit slimy, but he thought it would be rude. He thought it'd be a rude thing to mention. As per the instructions you have received over the phone, you have sent all the officers home, correct? Yes, sir. Very good. The agent entered the building and they started toward the holding cell. You can appreciate, Francis, the need for absolute privacy in matters like this. We can't have the press knowing about the existence of supernatural creatures like this. It would send the country into mass hysteria. Of course, sir. That's why I contacted you. This frogman situation is far more than me and my men can handle. The chief opened the door for the agent. They stepped into the frogman room. You were smart to do so. Would you unlock the cell, please? Of course, sir. The chief worked the lock. It clicked open, and he turned to hold the door open for the agent. After you, sir. The chief's eyes fell to the gun in the agent's hand. Agent Gaff pulled the trigger, and the bullet ripped right through the chief's chest. He collapsed. What are you doing? Helping you commit suicide. He stepped over the chief and grabbed the frog cage. He left the cell and hung in the room's doorway. But why? Said the chief. Why? Then it sunk in. The chief grew pale. He felt cold. He tasted metal in his mouth. Wait a minute. Norm Gaff. And with a little rearranging, Frogman. Agent Gaff ripped off his mask and eyed down the dying chief with cold glass frog eyes. Bingo. He pulled the trigger and sent a bullet straight through the chief's head.
Oh my God, that was fucking hilarious. I love how this is structured too, because like the absurdity escalates so beautifully, right? Because it starts off so mundane and then the wonderful detail. That, by the way, is one of the most disgusting and upsetting interrogation scenes that I've ever heard. And it's funny how you do it, because usually like you go for like the inhumanity of it, like they're beating the guy with a phone book or they're like tasing him or something. But the idea of just like making someone eat a fucking fucking snotty tissues. It's so revolting and it's so inhumane and it's beautiful and it just gets funnier and more absurd from there. That was wonderful. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Sorry. Up next is Blick.
Oh, oh hi. This is a weird piece that was inspired after spending a day with Unity last month. I rented a cottage by a lake, and he came by and visited, and we were just, shooting the shit for hours and stuff. And so I ended up doing this thing, which is, I don't even know what to call it. I had it published as, I called it a CNF Ephacaris, but it really, it's a collage of a photo from a play of mine called Bed Bugs and Beyond. That's okay. And then a quote from Tennessee Williams. And then I just retold this really heard story about Tiresias, the blind seer in the Oedipus plays, and how he lost his vision. So this is the collage, right? So it starts with a quote. It starts with the picture and starts with the quote. "A prayer for the wild at heart kept in cages," by Tennessee Williams. And the piece is titled Tiresias Disrobes. One day in ancient Greece, Tiresias was walking down a path when he was interrupted by two snakes copulating on the road, blocking his way. Tiresias got so angry that he took his staff and killed one of the snakes. It turned out to be the female serpent. What Tiresias didn't know was that these snakes were guarding Hera's sacred tree with golden apples in the garden of Hesperides. Hera's rage upon learning of the death of beloved female guardian snake was to turn Tiresias into a woman. For 10 years, Tiresias lived as a woman, and not just any woman, but the town whore. One day, the female Tiresias was walking down a path and once again came upon two snakes copulating. She killed one, and this time it turned out the slain serpent was male, so Hera changed him back to a male. These gender transformations made Tiresias the only man in the history of the world to have been both a man and a woman. Years later, Zeus and Hera were having a terrible fight on Mount Olympus about who enjoys sex more, the man or the woman. Hera had caught her insatiable husband once again cheating on her. Zeus roared females enjoyed sex more than men. Hera called him a liar and claimed females accommodate the male out of duty, not pleasure. Zeus called her a liar. Hera screamed back that her husband was a trickster and a vicious rapist. Their battle over which gender derives the greatest satisfaction from carnal knowledge went on for days. A frustrated Hera finally summoned Tiresias to Mount Olympus to settle their heated dispute. Tiresias' unique experience of indulging in sexual intercourse as both a man and a woman could supply the definitive answer. Poor Tiresias was summoned to the foot of their thrones, where Hera ordered him to respond to the question of whom achieves more satisfaction from sexual intercourse, the man or the woman. Tiresias drew a breath, fearful of the consequences for any opinion he would admit, but he decided to tell the truth and answered, "It is 9 parts female, 1 part male." An enraged Hera did not allow Tiresias to explain which 9 parts favored women and what single part favored men, because she immediately blinded him for exposing her feminine truth to Zeus, thus losing their argument. One god cannot undo the spell of another god, not even the king of the gods, Zeus. Yet, taking pity on Tiresias, Zeus decided to give the poor man the gift of inner vision, the prophetic insights of a seer, to compensate for his wife physically blinding Tiresias due to his honesty. This is how Tiresias, the blind seer who foretold Oedipus that he would kill his father and copulate with his mother. That's my collage. That's the collage.
Man, that's great. And that's one of my favorite Greek myths too. Eliot actually kind of worked it into The Wasteland with all the references to Tiresias that he has in there, and to I don't know, it's just I don't know what it is about that myth that's so compelling, but the way that you've retold it here, like, and it just like by placing it within the modern context of like our modern conversations about gender and about sexuality, like it has so much fucking resonance, doesn't it? Like this ancient Greek fucking myth says so much about all our contemporary little fights and modern like obsessions.
Well, the Greeks, I mean, everything, you don't need to go to a shrink. The Greeks, that's why every psychological term is Greek. Anything you need to learn about life, you can get it from them, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway,
So I gotta thank Unity for that. So thank you, Unity. All right.
Oh, I wasn't sure if Unity was going to say anything. Sorry about the awkward pause there. But no, that was fantastic, Flick. I really enjoyed it. And both of these pieces have been kind of Halloween pieces. If you squint, actually, we've got a nice little like weird supernatural undercurrent running through tonight. So let's see where that goes. And actually, Adam just told me that he's free now. So Adam's up next then.
Okay, thank you, William.
Mhm.
There's nothing supernatural about this, and I'm a little reticent to read it because it's kind of long. Usually what I've read has been a couple sentences where someone leaves AA and jumps off a bridge, but this is a little different. It's a chapter out of a novel that I wrote that I'm kind of trying to resurrect and do. Essentially, the premise is an older man who becomes infatuated with the wife of his. It's called, this particular story is called Isabel. I remember, I'm sorry?
Oh, I think Mullane said you were cutting out a little bit. I think you're doing okay now, though. I think it was just maybe a little bit of interference in your connection. Although quickly, is this novel Goddard? Is that the one that you're
Yeah.
that this is from? I have my copy. I'm traveling this weekend and I put it in my bag. So I'm gonna try to, fingers crossed, I'm going to try to read it.
Okay.
But anyway, it's all yours. You sound good now. You should be okay.
Okay. This is the first time he meets the woman. I remember distinctly the day I met Bella. I had a toothache, and it may have even been my wife's birthday. Heather, bless you, you know I was no good with them. The afternoon was one of those clement summertime bubbles of sun and light breeze, the kind of idyllic atmosphere fit for a ball game, or if one is jaded or beyond 30, a gin and tonic and a muzzy, regretful reverie in the backyard shade, beneath an ash tree in my house. Half a pack of cigarettes, barefoot, a Panama hat, the Paris Review, a metallic bowfly dying in my lemonade, a winged cerulean corpse drowned in sugar water, the whole thing a scene of obscenity. The static text of a bad poem, the madrigal venery rested in my lap, aching to be set on fire. My own notebook sat verseless, untouched, a vellum coaster for the sodden coffin of the fly, who by the day's end I believe I had cried over in my drunken state. Oh, but now I know it was on account of your departure that day, my dear Bella, Bella, my bellflower, my bellatrist's muse, my Isabel is my Bella. I never considered myself a conqueror of women. How could I? At 45, I was a terrible likeness to Cezanne's rendering of Henry Gasket, and I can consider myself now perhaps the farthest thing from a Don Juan, as has ever existed on terra firma, where we all occupy our own little plot of physical space in the rolling carnival. I had one partner in life, Heather, and we got along as couples will, missionary only, secundum artem, until the middle of the second decade, when the marriage evolved to a point of sexless nightly routine. How was your book? Should I set the alarm clock for 6 or 6:30? How does your stomach feel? Good night, dear. I was never very sexually animated. Erotic impulses were not my motivation for activity. A kind of furious moxie was roused on that regular summer day when Walter would introduce us, Heather and I, to You Have Her Name, the wondrous self. When the afternoon closed, that is to say, when I had sat long enough to really loathe myself and life in the growing shade, I blamed the madrigal venery for my sudden loss of poetics. When the Favovian current scattered the atoms of day to a near eastern region in the early evening, not quite eventide, for it was still light, mind you, descended on the back lawn. Then did I join Heather at the double vanity to begin those occupations antecedent to a dinner party, a a clean shirt and shave, fresh trousers and socks, a splash of eau de cologne, and an inspection of a pounding molar that I've now complained of twice in the course of 500 words, more or less. It was around 6 p.m. that Heather dutifully confronted my non-recognition of the date on which she was born, however many decades before. Another faux pas by aloof Goddard. Then, in this order: an apology, on my knees for show, a farcical female scorn followed precipitously by forgiveness and a makeup. Oh, placated Heather, life was so easy in your house. A flower waiting for you post-shower by the misty sink, plucked from the neighbor's garden in my bath towel, was still your devoted husband. Walter called, said he'd be late. My tooth hurt excessively, and I medicamented myself with some promise to reduce pain. Heather prepared the food and table while I reddened my teeth with wine in the study. I'd retired from my career too early in life, but I enjoyed my pension, and it was a habit of mine to occupy myself with a paper or an essay in that dusty crypt where Heather dared not tread for all our years. It was a cramped space, but if anything, I am an anti-claustrophobe, and I hadn't ever climbed the walls, as the saying goes. I could spend a week in a black box under the earth with only my thoughts and a little air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink, and if I may envision it as a hygienic experiment, some means to discard of my waste. I've never really feared true physical confinement. On the topic of claustrophobia, there was an interesting in vivo experiment by Goddard, aloof buzzard, my friend, myself, and that isolated preprandial wine daydream of your study. How could you have known? Plumless dunce, how could you have known then of the imperial virgin in the A-line flower skirt and white cotton blouse on her way to your very residence? That stockingless pixie who would walk up through the parterre of your lawn and grace the steps of your door attached at the arm to her debonair husband, your son Walter, who in his usual sinless way would overlook the peacock feather growing in the canthi of his father's sable eyes as they met those of the one he loved. I retired in my study, parenthetical, Malbec. I had met two of Walter's girls on prior occasions, two nameless women from two nameless periods in the boy's college and post-college life, who he thought worthy of an introduction to his immediate ancestors. Walter was an attractive young man, as was our mailman. He charmed the fair sex without much effort and was able to beguile the better looking among their ranks, which, as I learned in Walter's case, were two women who regarded Middlemarch as either a formal date in late winter or the nom de plume, my words, for a rum-based punch, the recipe for which, gasp, she could not then recall. Walter quested after bloom and polish, quite a different path from his elder brothers who, being both married too early, had gone in, dynamically repressed, for the rough-hewn holler of laundry basket type of companion and decently resembling their mother. I was proud of my Walter, as proud as a father could be, though I did not anticipate his bringing anything more than a coquettish 7 on a scale from 1 to 10 that day. Oh, but my life for BE11A. Studied the little curios haunting the top of my gentleman's desk, the bric-a-brac associated with a learned man's profession acquired over time. A small leaden paperweight and the bust of Young, copper dirndled figurine, a Visconti Rembrandt roller pen, monogrammed, an El Casco small stapler, cufflink case display only, briar wood pipe, an ornate wooden clock, cuckoo, an ancient calendar for my days of appointments, and the audible yelling of my own name, the last overheard as I sat drowsily in a state of Venus buoyancy reflecting on the chimes in the hall. Heather's footwork, the door, voices in plural, an alien female soprano, Heather, foul, off-key contralto, calling after me a second time. I rise. Eager, surprised, pulled out of an ill humor and smiling ridiculously into space. Thus did I leave my bantam bower in search of my grown boy and his affianced flame. Such was I, affable Goddard, the first time I encountered Bella, standing there bare-legged, blowing peach beneath a plastered arch in the principal corridor of my own foyer. Dad, this is Isabel. Oh, thank you, Walter. Thank you from the bottom of my malignant heart, suffering son. Thank you for that ciphered moment of rapture, that unforeseen. I received Walter first, gripped him tight against my body, rubbed his back from the neck to just below the waist, kissed his cheek, kissed his forehead, grabbed at his sides and held him in front of me before embracing him again with a second round of caresses. I did all of these things so that my performance of them on Bella was not without its justification and precedent. Every act was perfectly calculated during that first squeeze with his darling. My hand stopped just high enough above the superior aspect of the buttock to satisfy my urge without inspiring alarm in my lovely guest. My fingers moved up her back where they read like braille the lace filigree of her brassiere. My warm paw came to rest with a gentle sweep on the nape of her neck where my knuckles were tickled by the felled, still wet from shower cilia of her walnut hair, the scent of which I sampled. I hadn't seen my son in such a long time. I was happy, outwardly, to see him. And if I was too liberal with my hands on the new miss, I had got carried away in paying my respects, well, chalk it up to the enthusiasm of a loving, excited, innocent old father absorbed in a moment of ripe frism. I know you covered for me, Walter, loyal son. I know that in that car ride home, when she broached the subject of old wandering hands, you defended your papa, the bubbly, cuddly, wine-bibbing, rubbing type, in vino deceptum. The banal temptation incited by the postmodern god cliche dictates that I compare her to some still life product of the Florentine Renaissance, that I write Venus, Venus, in the garden, in the shell, and encourage plaudits by the invocation of Sandro, that I compare her to some late classical muse entombed in paste and red figure, that I hearken versification, lo, in yon brilliant hallway niche, Bella, like I see thee stand. I toil over a paragraph with the sole mission, excessive literary ornateness and affectation. I must snub these seductions. No artist on earth has ever captured the sensual pulse of live flesh, and the closest that Bella has ever come to art was in a black and white profile shot by Luc Fornal. Oh, what crumbs of cold ash when compared to Isabel in rippling technicolor. I exclaim these things, which is the reason for that vertical mark denotive of zeal. And I am a zealous connoisseur. It was an instantaneous kind of infatuation there in the foyer. Thence, with appropriate affect and demeanor, my old clinician's brain, toes, ankles, calves, beginning of thighs, sublime, fingers, wrists, elbows, shoulders, mine. This I repeated to myself throughout dinner, hummed even. My femme fatale with your ambrosial bob, your sweet celestial blue eyes, your nose, your mouth, your cheek, your illimitable symmetry, your lithesome finish, your, oh, I'd like a taste at this moment, please. Drinks before dinner, the gentle interrogation of the new sweetheart, chat about expected rain, Walter's job, quote, so much in common, end quote, between Heather and Isabel, Heather's words, filled glass of wine, quote, oh Goddard, end quote, Heather's words again, other customs and procedures. So it goes. Could not avert my eyes from the infrequent open skirt opposite. Bella, careful though she was to press the cotton fabric to her skin during the change of position, one leg over the other and vice versa, would reveal a small window into that white satin secret, that terrifically tempting triangle vested between her upper thighs. I had never considered myself of the skirt-obsessed class, had never been that debased man repeatedly dropping his silverware at the cafe, as it were. Yet as I sat there in the plush divan of my old familiar haunt, my ears alert to the voices of my little clan, found myself searching in a possessed kind of way for a glimpse, however slight, of that fugitive curiosity at the obscured crown of her lower extremity. That teasing recessed gem that, when brandished on the beach, is but a prosaic particle in a larger standard scene, but when curtained by the cloaking fabric of a dress and revealed in the fluttering evanescence of a reckless leg crossing, effectual in overcoming the most iron will of man by causing him to ogle, before feigning disinterest, passing is all. So was I, helpless sap, as the slightest twitch in Bella's body, the object of my relentless peripheral vision, would cause my eyes to dart to her lap before proceeding to the far wall and then the ceiling, as though making a general inspection of the room. She didn't catch me even once. Heather had made a roast for her birthday. Dinner's ready, she said, on returning to the living room. Bella rose. A final peek. We made our way, a happy nucleus, to the dining room, that unfrequented chamber that got up dust by the week and held crystal and china captive behind glass. The table was too long for four, but as Heather and I were seated at opposite poles of the open place-set earth, I was thankful for the distance between 12 o'clock me and my remote 6 o'clock mate. Walter at 9 o'clock, Isabel at 3, a mere quarter hour from the midnight patriarch who, before sitting, raised his glass to the health of his son's girlfriend. The conversation, or table talk, got along famously in the Southern Hemisphere, where my wife inveigled Isabel with stories from Walter's youth. Took it like a martyr, smiling at all the right breaks in Heather's claptrap, complimenting the roast and sides, while I, alone in the Arctic, succumbed to a perfect fascination with the profile of Bella's turned head. I occupied myself with the wine bottle, and for the greater part of the meal was lost in a happy little humbug's daydream, and resting in a hot palm, taking in the sights and sounds without committing myself to any part of the conversation. My mind wandered to thoughts on a recent article I'd read on the death penalty, a nice little invention in our state. Then, engaged? No kidding. Heather in hysterics. Goddard, what's the matter with you? Goddard, stupid, shaken from ennui, looking imploringly into the smiling face of the new Bella for explanation. Eyes on Heather, Heather ecstatic. Eyes on Walter, Walter same. Dad, we're getting married. It was wonderful news, I admit, to a lost polar bear drunk on old grapes at the North Pole of his table. Dessert. Damned dark chocolate confection. The following lucid recollection. Isabel excuses herself for the bathroom, and I immediately spill wine on my shirt front as pretext to guide her to the upstairs guest lavatory on the way to my own room for a new shirt. She locks the door. I hear her lift the seat of the commode and rest it against the tank while I rest my ear against the door. The way the urine struck the toilet water filled me with a thrill that is only explainable by a long and torturous dialectic process that will not marry the reader to. Creak in the floorboard beneath my fat foot. I can verily feel, like a chalky paste in the mouth, her wide eyes staring at the door and wondering what lurks beyond as I tiptoe down the hall and hide amidst the hanging shirts of my walk-in closet. I re-encounter her at the table, chewing on a mouthful of the cocoa affair. She wipes an index finger across the corner of her mouth. She knows. Look at myself and realize I am attired in the same disgraced shirt, the patch of red beating on the buttoned opening like a genuine telltale heart. I reverted to the wine as though it were a kind of anchor, as panicked men will do, pressed to what their insecurities insist as a corner. Alack, 2008 was finished, and I made a desperate show of listlessness by savoring the single molecule of red wine from the lip of my empty chalice, while peering at Bella over the bounding dome of finger-stained glass. Affirming that she did not eye me with dubiety, I excused myself and returned to the table with another bottle from my humble basement cache. Everyone was sincerely enjoying themselves and each other, and I could tell. I am of that sensitive species of human that can detect the slightest emotion or veiled mental state. Isabel. It was an old creaky house, and he, me, happy, harmless, old, earthly, telluric soul, my mind at ease. And just as I was beginning those machinations preparatory to unsealing the bottled light, just as I was securing a lightness of mind by the prospect of a fresh glass, I apprehended that awful three-word death knell, that adenoidal chirp that is the forte of a pecking hen, invariably proclaimed at the precise moment when the starved tendril of the wine key is immersing its cork. Enough wine, Goddard. I did not concede victory to her, but removed the stopper, poured myself a tall glassful and drank. Your move, dear. Tete-a-tete proposed, a spousal challenge, but she merely rolled her eyes and continued her offensive sermon on the virtues of a big church wedding. So I returned to my little region of the planet, brain soggy with intoxicant, my heart on fire for the glistening mademoiselle at my table who was fast becoming my religion. There were goodbyes in time, simple partings between the old and the young. Such wonderful news, such great news, the wedding, the preparations, help you with everything you need. Money is no object. Must have a big cake. We love Walter so much. We love you so much, etc. Another cycle of hugs. I was more conservative in the second round, and implemented that one-armed meager embracer that the old demure churchman falls into when a person insists on a hug, and he is made to suffer a fool in a crowded narthex. I ached for her, yearned to rip at her blouse, and lusted for her naked skin. I stood as close as could reasonably be accomplished under the circumstances, and inhaled through my nose so as to pasture my hope on her pheromones and dream of future joys. I tried in vain to take a mental photograph of her face, and then they were gone. From a bay window, I watched their parting, focusing on the ethereal trail of her pendulating mane as it danced in the increased breeze of the night air. How I wished to wake next to that person anywhere on earth, on a scandalous floor mattress in a bombed-out Super 8 in Arkansas, for example. Anything to be with that golden woman. Later, in the still light of the bedside lamps, I laid quietly next to the life partner I did. She was reading a selection from the Oprah book. At the time, I hadn't experienced a single homicidal urge in my entire life's history. I didn't ruminate over the prospect of smothering her to death with a pillow. I simply hadn't thought. Oh, reader, what strange new worlds I would encounter in the following months when the theology of Isabel would beckon me onto such abominable undertakings as. That night, I turned to my Heather and kissed her cheek, placed her book on the nightstand. How was your book? I asked. Should I set the alarm clock for 6 or 6:30? How does your stomach feel? Good night, dear. I love you. Of course, I really meant turn out the light, which she did. The electricity coursing through my brain was not in the least bit comfortable. I tried in vain to imagine the domestic privacies of my newfound swan. My final exertion was composed of a grinding focus on the memory of that spectacular satin triangle, an image I hope to take to my grave. In an hour or two, Malvik had taken its course, and the magnetic fields of black space closed in on my lightning eye. That's it.
That was fucking fantastic. I mean, obviously, it's really evocative of some of my like favorite authors. Like, there's a lot of Nabokov in this, and like obviously, like in your kind of intellectual, unreliable narrator, but also in like just the sheer beauty of the prose here. Like, just the prose is so fucking rich. Every detail is, I think someone in the chat said musical, and that's a great term for it, but like, it just beautifully chosen, every word beautifully selected, and the way that beauty like is like the patina that's like over like the pitch black darkness of this, like the psychological ugliness here. That I love that dynamic. It's just a fucking wonderful piece. And I read the end of the book too, and I'm really interested to see, because I know kind of where this narrator ends up, and without spoiling anything for anyone else watching, it's a very different psychological place, right? And I really want to see how you handle that psychological transformation. I'm stoked, is what I'm saying. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, well, thanks, William, and thanks for reading it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening.
Next up, let's see, looking at the list.
That was fucking phenomenal.
It reeked with, it was so honest. It seemed like such an honest, yeah, it was, I agree with you. It's phenomenal is the right word. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, fucking phenomenal. Brendan, you're up next.
All right. So this is, I think Rudy has the link.
Yeah, am I posting this one?
Don't post it. Definitely
Roger.
put it in the chat though. That's
I
good.
put it in the chat, yeah.
So this is kind of an introduction story to the setting that I've been working on for years, since what I
No
think will be its
costume
final
this year?
incarnation. No, I did not
Ah.
have time to sculpt the mask like I was planning on, so you'll have to make do with my own ugly face here. All right. Klein Jurgel was weary. The journey back to the city of Anselden had taken weeks longer than he expected. The security on the roads was new. When he had left, there were only outposts within the first 2 miles of the sanctuary city. Now they seemed to dot the entire span to the north. The price of being a fugitive was the lack of such security being a benefit. He knew the shadows were looking for him. He knew the Lightbringers were looking for him. And so he was forced to travel with his team through the wilds far sooner than he had hoped. His driver took the lift car around the western edge, carefully maneuvering and changing course to follow the streams. 4 men, all clad in the same unobtrusive black coats and hats, sat in a vehicle moving at a snail's pace for hundreds of miles, all to be slowed even further by the encroachment of nature. His research, thankfully, assured him that only natural threats lurked within these woods. There was no threat of primordial terrors, no risk of the Fae, and even the Terracavore were known to be driven out of their nests this close to the sanctuary. They would travel down the ravine into the valley south of the city. There was no road, but that was little concern for a vehicle that moved a few feet above any debris or rocky terrain. His operatives in the city were waiting at the barred sewer gates for him. The view of the tiered city above was stunning. It was like looking at the mirror of the mythological cosmos, the filthy, grimy, forgotten sewers, rising to the largely cast-off dregs of the slums, rising to the tightly packed and grimly built dwellings of the working class. Above those 3 were the bright lights of the entertainment ward with the shining marble of the Zendranir Terrace, rising to the glorious noble district before finding the bright lights and thick clouds of smog coming from the industrial sector, all topped off by the shining glass encapsulating the Cerosian arcology that stood guard over it all. Marching into the sewers was an ignoble return to his city of birth, where his father was once a respected researcher. But such was the shame attached to disgrace. His final days in Anselden followed witnessing his father's execution for heresy, Seeing your father put to the torch sours the sights. Now, years moving from hovel to cave to outpost, evading the pursuits of those who would cut his research short, would reach their inevitable end, where it all began. Not precisely, of course. He'd have preferred to have access to where it all truly began, his childhood home. But that had been long seized by the Church of Eternal Light as payment for the price of having to hunt his father down. Instead, his journey home would end within the confines of a shuttered warehouse in the dregs. The dusty corridors and ramshackle rooms were far from what he had envisioned when he set about this endeavor. He'd have much preferred an opulent chamber like the ones of old, bedecked in sconces and braziers of brass, velvet curtains, smoothly tiled floors, and an altar of marble. None of those were an option now. Time was of the essence, knowing that the convergence of the four moons would not come again in his lifetime, and it was only this particular lay crossing that would enable what he needed to harness. So he would have to settle for the grime covering the old brick walls. He would have to settle for the cracked concrete floors pitted with years of water damage and impacts. He would have to settle for the dim light of the makeshift garbage can fire pits at the center and candles scattered around the edges of the room. He would have to settle for a table comprised of 3 large shipping crates placed side by side. It wasn't what he had envisioned, but it was what he could achieve, and he knew that it would suffice. He removed his hat and set it on one of the crates by the door of the main chamber. As he combed his fingers through his thinning, silver-grayed hair, he took account of what his operatives had set up. With a slight nod, he muttered beneath his breath, "Yes, this will do." The 3 men who had traveled with him made their way into the chamber and set about their own tasks. One began to draw up archaic runes along the walls, spirals and angles made with chalk and all the confidence brought on by familiarity. Another set to work beginning at the center, drawing up chalk circles, one large in the center, 4 others at the 4 cardinals, and drawing up sigils in each marked zone. The 4th moved to the table and unfolded the satchel he had carried with him, laying out a large altar cloth, a bowl, a sickle, and a large dagger. As the work was done, Klein leaned against the jamb and folded his arms across his chest, idly checking his watch and minding the time. He knew that his operatives would be here soon. No sooner did the thought pass his mind did he hear the door open upstairs. Moments later, a procession of 4 others dressed as he was and 4 others wearing hoods entered the chamber. "Corin, have the sacrifices been properly vetted?" Klein said flatly, without so much as shifting his gaze from the circle in the center of the room. "Yes, Master Yergel, rare though they may be," Corin answered, motioning to each in turn. The first, a young woman of shapely form in a white dress. A Zandranir virgin, obtained from the slave markets of the Ebon stronghold. We were told that she has been kept in isolation to ensure her purity, as they know as well as we that a Zandranir left of their own devices will not remain pure for long. Examinations confirmed what was promised. Gentle ones, of course. Corin motioned to the next, a young child dressed in green. Pre-adolescent male Theranir, yet to display any signs of the bestial curse that plagues their kind. Both parents were of the avian lineage, as requested. Obtained from one of the few holdout tribes in the Iron Mountains. Tests have confirmed that the line is strong, especially so on the father's side. His hand directed to a third, a slender man whose skin seemed spotted and withered by age, dressed in a simple black tunic and pants. An elder priest of the Eternal Light, taken from a cloister in the southwest, aged 76, devoted to a vow of pacifism and responsible for hand transcribing hundreds of copies of the holy texts of early Valorian religion. And to the 4th, a woman clad in a gown of blue and robe of blue with a notably swollen belly. And finally, an Elorian mother-to-be, pregnant in her 3rd trimester with her first child. She was the last acquisition and had to be taken earlier this afternoon from her home in the dregs. Risky, perhaps, but she'll not be missed. "Very good, Corin, very good." Klein's words were hollow. His eyes focused not on the retinue of sacrifices, but on the ticking hands of his watch. His retainers took the sacrifices and stood each one in one of the circles surrounding the center, leading them to kneel. Yergel nodded absently to himself and strode from the door to the table, taking up the bowl and the dagger. "Gentlemen, the time has come. What we do now will prove that our research has not been without merit, and will demonstrate that our understanding of the nature of the aurors may serve beneficial to others. After tonight, no longer will we be dismissed as heretics and dangerous fools, but we will be seen as what we truly are, innovators and academic inheritors of a great legacy that will protect our kind from the threats of the world beyond. The assistants that had come with Klein made their way to the garbage cans and struck matches, setting the kindling of crumpled newspapers and broken pallets ablaze, filling the room with flickering amber light. As they began to light the other myriad candles around the perimeter, the glow settled to steady orange. Klein began to chant, the language nothing that anyone else in the room could comprehend. The words were not of any tongue native to the continent of the Phoenix, let alone the world of Ethelwell. Visceral, guttural sounds mixed with hissing sibilants and thunderous clashing of consonants. As he spoke, he moved, stopping to stand behind the child, his words shifting to his native tongue. We offer up the blood of primal youth, limitless potential. In a practiced move, he placed the bowl beneath the boy's chin, pressed the dagger to his neck, and in a clean drawing cut, sliced open his throat. The blood poured out in rivulets, enough collecting in the bowl to fill it to a third. He stepped back, and the assistant allowed the dying body to fall to the ground in a heap upon the chalk sigil beneath him. Klein's chanting returned to the strange language, and he began to move again. Pausing behind the Zandranir maiden, his words changed once more. We offer up the untouched innocence of one born to decadence, a sacrifice of pleasures never known. He repeated the same motions, placing the bowl at her clavicles and slicing across her arteries, filling the second third of the bowl in moments. Again, he stepped away, and his assailant and his assistants followed suit. The young woman fell in a heap upon her sigil as her blood poured freely on the pockmarked concrete. He returned to the strange language and approaches the old man. We offer up the devotion of a life spent idolizing that which holds us all back from reaching our full potential, a faith of hypocrites and oppressors to be torn down. Again, he placed the bowl and cut with the knife, filling the vessel to capacity in short order. As he walked away, chanting in those sinister intonations, the old man slumped to the floor as the others had before. Klein returned to the makeshift altar table, setting down the blade with care to not make a sound. Cautiously, he picked up the sickle and moved to the final sacrifice. His incantations continued as he stood before her, and his assistant forced her to kneel, then removed her hood. Klein, lean and tall, looked down into her eyes, bleary and worn from whatever concoction had been fed to her to keep her pliable. Jurgel gave a nod, and his assistant opened the woman's mouth. We offer up the life of a mother, full of love that will never meet its recipient. We offer her a final drink that she may be bathed in the warmth of life, of potential, of innocence, and of devotion. He pressed the bowl to her lips and tipped it. The still body-hot blood of 3 sacrifices poured into her mouth and ran down her face like a tide, bathing her body and staining the entire front of her gown, causing the garment to cling to every bit of her pregnant belly. He handed the bowl to his assistant and took the woman's hand, guiding her to stand. Mindlessly, though whether it were a trance or a drugged intoxication was unclear, she rose to her feet, and Klein led her to the center of the larger circle. He deftly helped her to remove her garments, leaving her standing naked before him. He settled his free hand on her belly, and the faintest of smiles crossed his stern facade as he felt the feeble kick against his hand from within. He gripped the sickle tightly, and we offer up the life never lived, opportunities never known, and breath never drawn. With a sudden thrust, he plunged the point of the sickle into the woman's womb, carving upward with a strength unexpected in such a spindly man. Blood and amniotic fluid spilled to the floor, followed shortly by the cry of the woman as she collapsed in agony. Klein held the sickle aloft, his eyes focusing on the crimson reflection of himself in the firelight. He looked down at his work, the posthumous contraction of muscle fibers causing the fetus to spill out of the large gash, the torso partially cut in twain. With a deep, ragged, satisfied breath, he called out, "We beseech you, spirits of the torment, to send forth one of your own. Drink of the sacrifices we have offered and take root here on the mortal world. Come forth and speak with me that I may learn to become more like you. You who have survived for so long in a domain so dangerous." He watched and waited. Moments passed in silence as the flames flickered all around him. His eyes darted around, fervently searching for any sign that his efforts had been a success, and yet there was nothing. The flesh of his left eyelid began to twitch anxiously as his mouth twisted into a grimace. He turned toward Corin and strode feverishly to nearly press his face against his assistant's, bellowing as the man nervously backed away. What did you not understand about what I needed? Did you defile the fucking Xandranir, you filthy fucking idiot? Did you take the wrong goddamn child? Did you take some infirm old man out of an asylum? Before Corin could even attempt to defend himself, the blade of the sickle arced up and was plunged through his lower jaw, the tip biting deeply into his soft palate. Furiously, Klein pulled the blade free and spun to face the other assistants. And what of you? Did any of you befoul my resources? But Klein's face would soon go pale as another assistant's head seemed to burst from within, as if some immense pressure had been placed on the back of the skull, splattering the walls with blood, viscera, and bits of bone and gray matter. Another collapsed as his spine flew across the room like an airborne serpent, rattling bone on bone, freed from the flesh of its former owner. Flames on candles began to snuff themselves out. The garbage bins dimmed. There was a shower of blood spraying from the neck of a third assistant before he too collapsed to the floor. Klein frantically turned around, searching for anything amiss. The other assistants tried to run for the exit. One found himself hurled upward by an unseen force, his skull cracking against the exposed steel support beam of the floor above. Another doubled over and spun about, an eruption of his entrails being torn free and splashing blood in an arc projecting from his intestines as they flew freely, pulled back as he collapsed to the ground. The final assistant was hurled backward into the nearest garbage can pyre, sending a sluice of ash and embers scattering into the middle of the summoning circle and surrounding the corpse of the mother and child. Yergel felt his heart race as he focused on the direction of his now slain assistants and began to back up toward the crate altar. His eyes could barely focus in the diminished light, let alone with the flare from one of the fire pits being bowled over. But he could now make out a shape in the shadows. No larger than a mortal, but shrouded in wings that twitched and stretched, glistening in the remaining flickering light. It began to approach him slowly, and as it drew nearer to the embers, Klein could see the grotesque muscles, corded and sinuous. Worse, he could see the baleful grimace of a face inhuman, but that he couldn't help but feel was familiar. The features were twisted, angular, and cruel, but he recognized them. His heart paused its work for but a brief moment as his breath caught in his throat. It was his own face that he was confronted with. The creature spoke, the words shifting from one language to another before settling on the native tongue of Olor. You would dare to summon me forth to exchange words, you petty oaf. You know nothing of what we are, nothing of what we endure, nothing of what we wish to make you endure. You would think to control me, to set out this circle and these sigils to prevent my escape. You should have been more mindful not to allow the mother to tread on the chalk. Klein's words sputtered, hoarse as he backed against the altar. I only wish to work with you. In a flash of movement, the creature's arm swept out, backhanding Klein across the face with such force that he was thrown over the table, landing with a clattering heap as the ritual tools followed in his wake. His pulse pounded in his orbital socket. His very bones felt as if they had been set on fire. His vision blurred for a moment, and when it returned, it was spotted from the sudden pressure. He rolled onto his back, but the shape was already above him, looming over his prone body. It seemed to flicker in and out of being, but he couldn't be sure. He felt the hand reach down and grasp him by his collar, and he felt the ground beneath him fade away as he was hauled up and off of his feet. As his vision refocused, he could swear that he saw the room empty between flashes of the thing before him. The creature pulled him close, keeping his feet just above the concrete floor until their noses could nearly touch as it hissed. I will not work with you, Klein Yergel. You are beneath me. You know nothing of how these matters truly work. Your theory's wrong. I will not work for you, but you will work for me. As long as I am here, I may as well have some fun. Before the words could settle, Klein crashed to the floor, his knees weak and weary. The candles flickered back to life. The fire pits that still burned roared back to their previous vigor. He scanned the room, taking stock of the 7 slain assistants and 5 lives sacrificed. The spilled over fire pit and the debris of the disturbed altar. He stooped and collected the sickle, tucking the hilt into his belt hastily. and moving over to the center circle. He took a knee and muttered an incantation in the twisted language he had spoken before, and was met with a struggling, desperate wail. He reached down and gently cradled the severed fetus that now clawed at the air, torso still split in half, one shoulder slack away from the body, its eyes blinking to reveal the hollow black voids beneath the lids.
Well, that was certainly seasonal. That was in keeping with yeah. No, that had powerful like Hammer horror film energy, right? Like Rudy mentioned Vincent Price as
Nice.
the thing, but yeah, no, that was like really had those good old B horror movie vibes where everything that like you could really like it felt like, you know, I don't know, sitting in some dingy theater like 80 years ago, and the, you know, the projector is, it's, the film is in black and white, and it's some like wizened old man I don't know, like it's someone just like, you know, some like great B movie actor like chewing the scenery. It was good. It was good shit, man. Good shit.
That's
Thank you.
interesting. I not a B movie, but I really was thinking, I mean, with your beautiful delivery and I was thinking of the Orson Welles War of the World that was broadcast, and your description, you know, it's really so interesting about your violence. You describe it so beautifully. I mean, I know,
Thank
I mean,
you.
you know, and there's, and there was one, I think I wrote it. There's just one visual about when he put his hand on his stomach and felt the feeble kick. You know, it was, you know, this guy, I mean, this whole thing, it was so violent, but there was something, there was an undertow of humanity, you know, it was great. It was
Thank you.
just great.
Thank you. I take that as very high praise.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that was, I agree with you, Blick. That was my favorite moment in the story too, because it as you said, like it's this almost moment of tenderness in the midst of this really like gruesome, otherwise very gruesome and very bleak piece.
Yeah, it's almost like a sentimentality type of thing. I was gonna mention that too. Like, as far as the protagonist, or I mean, whatever you want to call him, like Yurgle, I was imagining like Vincent Price and Witchfinder General, his character. Was it Hopkins or the you know, the Witchfinder? I mean, really, really vivid descriptions. Brought the character to life.
Yeah, Vincent Price is definitely someone that I had in mind writing that character.
Thank you, Brandon. You every Halloween, you fucking remind us of the reason for the season, right? Um, Jesse's up next.
Hello.
Hey Jesse, how's it going?
Good. Oh yeah, the link.
I
This
just put it in the chat.
right. This short story was published by the Sparrows Trombone, which is a website that just started recently. This is the same place that's going to publish my chapbook next year, so I like them. It's a flash fiction. It's very short. Okay. I'm about to read it. It's called For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. Just waiting for it to show up. The unspoken rule in Oliver's 8th grade class around the cafeteria table and the other furtive areas where kids' policy held sway was that if you could pull off a good enough mimicry of a gay man, that meant you weren't gay. We're not. It had to make people laugh. It only need to be 5 or 6 seconds long. The way Oliver interpreted it, it needed to be a substantial enough departure from your true self so that people could measure the distance between you and gay. It couldn't just be an imitation of a girl. There needed to be a somehow inherent knowledge that this was a gay dude you were doing. And it's not exactly like they were sitting in a circle in the cafeteria trading impersonations. It's just that one guy, Tim Geinz, for example, would do it off the cuff, and it would crack everyone up so bad that his stock would kind of rise. And you'd look at him and just know he can't be gay. Look at how he made such fun of gays. Tim Geinz would do what Oliver would call the well-known voice that might be considered entry-level if they'd known more at the time. Matt Welter in gym class had an knack for doing a moderately insightful impression of a guy so exasperated that everything was cause for emotional catastrophe that he somehow made clear it wasn't himself. Others just archly commented on clothes. I love your blank. Could be shoes or pants or backpack or hairstyle. All of this made Oliver very nervous about would he be able to do a good impression when his time came. What if he tried and it fell flat, wasn't believable enough, and they jumped to conclusions? So he undertook to do the best impersonation they'd ever seen in their lives. He got busy doing his research. He studied TV and movie characters. In on-screen interactions, gay men seemed to melt with a luxuriant knowledge of everything that went unsaid. He studied Charles Nelson Riley and Richard Simmons and that guy from the control tower in Airplane who pops into the frame every so often. Oliver was going for caricature since he would only have a small window of time to get his point across. Somewhere in that process, he got the picture that gay men were often smart, cultured, sensitive, and kind. Since Oliver was already all of those things, he felt that he had an edge on the competition that nobody could deny. Anyway, there were all kinds of louche, sophisticated, under-the-radar characters to draw from in the media, but he sensed he needed to go deeper. For the truth of the big role, he needed to rely on his own imagination. That's where his rendition would really get traction. The Brando-esque grace notes, how he played with the girl's gloves and on the waterfront to signify depth, verisimilitude. He picked the day after much introspection and practice. Time was running out to strike a blow. He could feel people wondering. They were going on a field trip to the Everson Art Museum in Syracuse, New York. He noticed no one talked to him on the bus ride, but that was fine as he was going over his part. As they went inside, they gathered into informal clutches of students, and he tried to maximize his audience by waiting for the right time. Something just comes over to you and you know it's go time. Oliver can't remember all the finer details. He thinks he said something about how a male nude in a neoclassical painting hadn't been short of coupons at the meat counter, leading into something about Oliver needing to watch his girlish figure. There was a musical interlude to his impression, he thinks, a few lyrics to a racy song he came up with on the spot, impromptu improvisation. The whole affair went on for way longer than 5 seconds. He wanted to set a theatrical benchmark. He wanted to push it. Oliver slayed. He had them all laughing at him. He tried to look in their eyes for an absence of judgment, nothing that would tell him they suspected him. He had carved out a little zone of safety for himself, an island of security. He got invited to parties. He finally had a shy girlfriend, a little later than everybody else. They were all having sex at 14 or 15. He went to college, got married, had kids, got a job. But even though nobody said otherwise, inwardly, Oliver felt nagged by the whole thing at the museum, somehow dissatisfied with that version. He can't see clearly, but he can sense that there were areas back then that were kind of rough and wouldn't meet his present rigorous standards. If he had a time machine, he would race back in time over decades and do it again. He finds himself practicing in his head, and he knows he would be able to pull off such a better mimicry now.
Oh my God, Jesse, this is fucking brilliant. I
Yeah,
love
that's
this
fucking great.
so
Oh
much.
my fucking god.
First of all, it's so fucking funny. I was laughing throughout, but like just setting aside the humor, like the precision, like the precise way that you like nail like the psychology of adolescent boys and exactly what's happening here. It's so perfect. It's beautifully perfect. And then the ending it's so funny and
So
it's
fucking
so
bloody
haunting,
fucking
and
great.
it says so much. Sorry, sorry, I think I just talked over someone. Sorry. But no, it's fucking fantastic. If someone else had something to say, I'm sorry, you can go now.
Well, thank you. I'll say something. Thanks for listening to the story.
It's amazing. Oh my god.
And yeah.
When I read it earlier this week, I immediately was gushing to Jesse. Like it was one of the is one of the best coming of age tales I'd read in many a year. It's really a small gem. It's a real
Fucking
gem.
phenomenal.
Yeah, you should publish that, man.
I don't know who's doing. Guys, if we've got trolls in here, you need to careful. But you know what, Billy, would you believe that he already published it? And that the link that you clicked on led to. Anyway, I'm sorry, Jesse. That was so fucking good. That was, every once in a while a piece comes along and I'm envious that like we didn't get the chance to publish it. And I'm fucking envious of this piece because it is.
Yeah.
I've gushed about it enough, but
Yeah, definitely ditto on the envy, the publishing envy. No, it was an amazing piece, Jesse, and it just perfectly captures that the spirit of that period.
Yeah, eighth
Everybody.
graders. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Jane Black is up next. Put the link in the chat.
Wait. Hello, everyone. I think my screen
Jane.
actually stopped blinking, so we're feeling very blessed right now.
Yeah, no, I can hear you loud and clear. And this is your first time reading at Misery Loves Company.
Yeah,
right?
this is my first time reading in general, so go
Damn,
easy on me.
2 tonight because that was good job as well.
And
yeah,
I'll be reading. Oh, what were you saying?
Oh, sorry, Jane. What is your? Do you want me to add you on Twitter? Do you
Oh
have
yeah, A Horrible Night. Is,
Gotcha.
So I'll be reading an old piece published over at Expats called "It'll Find You All the Time." I've made some minor tweaks to it, but the version that runs on Expat should do fine for us. And I'll just start reading, I guess. It'll find you all the time. You can feel her through the gloves. You can do your best to keep from touching her, but she'll find her way in. Bone is sharp, sharper than glass, and that's something I didn't know till I was picking it out of walls. Eddie and I bring extra pairs these days, pull them right over the other. Yellow rubber that makes me feel like a 50s housewife as I sponge at the paint, doing my best to be gentle. She had tried her best to make our job easier, laid 2 plastic shower liners on the floor to try and keep her blood from leaking into the carpet. Maybe it was out of the kindness of her heart. She sat in a chair on top, pulled the trigger with her toe. She had left the door locked, wanted to be left alone. She also left the overhead fan on high. Maybe she wanted to be comfortable. It means one thing to me. Room splattered red all around in a ring, flecks of her gray stuck to the TV and dripping down family photos and old LaCroix cans. She spills out of the plastic and all over the rug, crawling under and waiting somewhere dark for me to find her. She seeps down walls and cluttered bookshelves. She crowds the ceiling with her touch. She tried to be nowhere, and now she's everywhere at once. The window is smeared with soap scum and dead mosquitoes, sun falling over the scene all dreary and stained like a Goodwill dress. The bloody shards of bone catch the scraps of light that struggle through. Wet and glistening on the bed, on the lampshade, everywhere and everything beaded with her skull. Her room is a pomegranate, and we have to spend all day picking out the seeds. And it will take all day. We're in no rush. Me and Eddie listen to music and take our time and stay out of each other's way. Don't ever talk much inside. The families usually leave well enough alone. The room's still an open wound even if the body is gone. They let us do what we need to, even if it takes a couple hours too long, which is good for my paycheck and my back. I scrub the wall over the headboard of her bed, looking down at the anxious splatter huddled on the comforter. On her pillow, a stuffed bunny looks up at me with button eyes. I take it aside, put it in a plastic tub by the door, along with the other personal effects. A framed photo of a group of girls at graduation, smiling in that unsure way, A watercolor painting of the salt marsh about a mile down the road, a cable knit sweater, loose threads hanging off the sleeves, a dozen other little wilted things. Her dad can decide if he wants to try and scrub the fluid off or throw them away. They're all pieces of her too, just like the kind I seal up in blue under the label biohazard. Both will probably end up in the same trash. Sometimes they even ask me to take it there on my way out. Bag it and bury it, wrapped in plastic in a landfill only a couple miles from where the rest of her will be cloaked in pine. A part of me wants to keep everything she touches. When we leave after 3 more hours, Eddie tells her father everything we did. Had to rip up some carpet, had to spray everything down. Anything important is by the door. He keeps it brief and cordial. He's good at that. I can't speak a word to her dad, not when I just spent the whole day tasting his daughter's blood on the air. She makes her way, even through the mask. I brush right past him and head straight for the truck, leaving the screen door rattling its fists behind me. Shitty little shotgun house, and it's still better than the trailer I sleep in every night. I tear off my gloves on the lawn, and that's when I feel her again, scratching at my skin. She falls into my palm looking like a dog's tooth, one of those jagged ones at the back of the maw. I think briefly about letting her fall into the grass or throwing her out into the street. I think briefly about keeping her somewhere safe where no one could ever forget her. One of those velvet cushions with the knuckle bones of saints, a glass display with the body of Lenin. Everybody wants to throw her away. What's so wrong about letting people see you? Put you in a box, leave you to the worms. Why can't you ever have the gift of people looking in your direction? Open the coffin, empty out the bags, put her all back where she was. Let her be, let no one ever touch her again. Lock the door and clean the window and let everyone peer in. Let everyone see what happened, what she made of herself. An open air sculpture, a monument to all that remains. Down the road, 2 boys play under the shade of Spanish moss, shooting Nerf guns at each other and screaming. All at once, I feel disgusting. I slide into the passenger seat and grab Eddie's half-empty Coke, the metal hot to the touch from baking in the southern heat. I jam my fingers into the top and let her fall in with a lonely drip that splashes some up on my finger, warm and sticky. Ken was just going to be my ashtray anyway. I fumble around the glove box for a Bic and light a Camel, my hand shaking as I smoke out the window. A screen door slams. Eddie walks up, stuffing his gloves into his pockets. I wonder if they waited till he left to look at the room or if he showed them. I wonder if all that sterility was a comfort, a tiger that can't bite, frozen and stiff behind the glass of a museum display. I wonder if they cried and if Eddie had pretended to care. He flashes me a grin that tells me no, he didn't. He opens the door and puts his keys in the ignition. Wasn't too bad, right? Eddie says. I pass him a Camel as we pull away, and the sound of the boys laughing and wailing shrinks away behind the oak trees, swallowed up by the dust on the road. And I'll forget that one day too. If we have to clean up after another 12 gauge, your next job will be at my place, and I won't be there to help you much, I say with a smile, and my hand hanging in the breeze. Let the wind flow through my fingers, let it all leave me. Your place is a piece of shit, man. And knowing you, you won't even lay down a sheet or nothing. I'll pass. You can't pass. I'll call in sick. They'll send the whole thing to the dump and you'll be real trailer trash. I laugh and picture a Winnebago tomb. He slows down to pass a gaggle of flashing lights, a little white Nissan wrapped around a telephone pole. We both rubberneck a bit at the torn metal on the asphalt as we cruise on past. Squinting in the sun, we wonder if the patches of shimmer are oil or blood. He lets out a low whistle, and as I turn back to him, he has the Coke can at his lips. Must have been going at least 45. Nasty stuff, he says as he takes a sip of cola. I wonder if he felt her or if she stayed at the bottom with all that warm sugar. I wonder how long she could stay in there before melting in the acid and corn syrup, shrinking away into a honey-sweet disease. He notices me staring and gives a little shrug. I don't give a fuck if it's flat, man. I'm thirsty. I know better than to tell him. We stopped at the Wawa to grab lunch, but I'm not too hungry. A beer and a Snickers. When we stand at checkout, the boy at the register tries not to let on that he can smell us from across the counter. As he gets our change, Eddie palms one from the take a penny, leave a penny. You see that? I can make money even when we're on break. You ought to learn to hustle like a professional loser. Might be able to retire someday, Eddie says. The boy behind the counter gags as he gives me a handful of change. He tries not to touch my skin. He does his best not to breathe us in, like it might kill him. He turns away from us and apologizes. Eddie doesn't seem to notice. He looks at my handful of nickels and back again at his own clutch of quarters. He swipes mine and heads to get another Coke with a playful strut. I wander back outside and sit down on the curb, letting my boots lay in a pothole. Across the road, there's nothing but trees marked for removal, orange ribbons tied around their waists like princesses. Birds chitter away somewhere up in their arms. I wonder what it pays to chop down trees for a living if it feels just as bad. After a couple minutes, Eddie comes out with his Coke and an egg sandwich. He sits down next to me in the afternoon sun with a lazy sprawl. Boss called, he says as he pops the tab. Says we got a wrist job on the other side of town. It's a clean deal. He stayed in the tub, and get this, Guy's family doesn't even want to deal with the place, so we don't have to bother. Fuck, we could show up an hour late and say we'd been there the whole time. Nobody would know. I open my Snickers and it's already well on its way to melting. My nail is sinking in as I take a bite. I still taste her. So am I gonna have to call in sick tomorrow? He asks with a grin and a clap on my shoulder. I can smell death on my fingers. And that's the end.
Oh wow, that's haunting. Oh my God. I put a few lines in the chat that really grabbed me, but it's just like really like borderline hypnotic and magical the way you handled this like really bleak subject matter. I'm kind of like, I've always been kind of like morbidly fascinated by the whole like crime scene cleaner thing anyway. Like I've always thought that would be like really great material for a story, but what you've done here really fucking elevates that. You take like, yes, the material is intrinsically fascinating, but you add like a layer of like like profundity and depth and like psychological like complication that's really thrilling and really moving. It's fucking fantastic.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
I've always
I
been
remember
fascinated.
I remember reading this in Expat, and it was wonderful when I read it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
I've
don't
always-
link anything, so there's no, I mean, they have the author name only. There's no way to find out who wrote it. It's cool to start listening to it and then realize, holy shit, I read this.
Yeah, I've always been more really fascinated by the sanitation workers too. And I started writing that because I was like, I wanted to write a detective story at first. I was like, how do you write like a crime scene without like being a cop? And I was like, oh yeah, you could be a sanitation guy. And then I was like, yeah, it's actually like a lot sadder than like,
Yeah, that's
so I was
the
like,
thing.
yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to, I guess, like talk about trash. a lot.
Yeah.
I like trash.
No, and you really get at the sadness of it too. Like, you don't get the sense there's anything romantic about this besides like the weird romantic like fixations that the main character has, right? Everything
Mhm.
about their lives is like this really bleak working class shit. Like, I love the joke that the guy tells about like dragging the trailer to the dump and then you'll really be trailer trash or whatever. Like
Mhm.
that shit like really gets at like what it's like to work a shitty working class job, but it just happens that that job is cleaning up corpses, right? And I
Yeah.
don't know, the whole thing, it's beautiful.
like the tie between being considered socially trash and the way that your body is trash when you're dead.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for the kind words.
No, and thank you for sharing, Jane, and hopefully you'll come back to future Misery Loves Companies then.
I definitely hope to.
Awesome, awesome. So next up is Josh.
Yeah, I don't have anything for this week. I was gonna initially read a like 3,000 word short story about Hot Wheels, but the draft is not complete yet.
We have
And-
something to look forward to for next time, though.
Yeah, and then I was speaking to Derek, who I guess is gone now, just about, I don't know if anybody remembers Jenny Jones, but does anybody even remember that show? I mean, it was like a trashier Jerry Springer, essentially. It was American, so you guys should have seen it. I saw it on daytime television here. Anyways,
Unity remembers it.
one
I
of the-
only vaguely remember it, but Unity clearly does.
there was a guy on the show, Jude Angelini, but he was known as Rude Jude, and he would kind of like heckle like the fat troubled teenagers as they came back from boot camp or whatever for their behavioral issues and all that. Anyways, he's now a host on Eminem's radio channel. He has this show called, which I actually don't even listen to, the All Out Show. It's just, he's kind of like a shock jock radio guy. Anyways, oddly enough, he is also a writer of autofiction. and I came across his collection Hyena recently through recommendation of a friend who doesn't read. It's actually out on imprint of Simon and Schuster. So it was kind of it started as a blog, but it got I don't know. It was interesting. I was surprised. I didn't know what to expect when Rude Jude from Jenny Jones was writing flash auto fiction. So I just wanted to read like 3 kind of that stood out to me. I also think that like he has a similar sensibility to stuff that I like and I write. So the first one's called Crazy Sexy Cool. The first high school girlfriend I ever had looked like TLC. When people ask me which one, I say all of them. I was 15 when I met her. I'm on the bus coming back from Adams High because they didn't offer Black History at my school, and I'm taking Black History because of course I would take Black History. I see her sitting up near the driver, looking out the window, looking good, caramel complected with perky breasts. I take a couple days to get the nerve up to speak, but I do. Her name's Kit. I get her number. I call her that night. We talk for hours about nothing, about everything. She likes cartoons. She likes birds. She's always like, look at the birds, Jude. Look at the birds. I crack jokes and sometimes she gets them. When I get off the phone, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hit the road. She says, don't hit the road, Jude. Don't hit the road. I'm smiling. She likes me. I never had no girl like me before. Oh, you don't want to get off the phone, do you? You like talking to me, huh? Don't hit the road, Jude. You'll hurt your hand if you hit the road. Why you want to hit the road, Jude? I'm like, whoa, this chick's an idiot. Or maybe she's a genius. I was just watching on the Maury Povich show about how they got these chicks that act stupid but are really smart just so they can get over on the doctors they date. I'm gonna keep an eye on this one. Make sure she doesn't ask me for money or anything. She never does. So we're going steady. I never see her at school, only the bus ride back. We sit together. I rub on her leg with a little hard-on in my pants. The bus driver's always giving me dirty looks. Fuck her. What's she know about teenage love? I finally got a girl. I'm not the fat, funny sidekick anymore. I'm not Chris Farley cracking jokes for everybody, then drinking by myself when they couple off. Sometimes my old man even dropped me off at her house, and I'd suck her titties in the kitchen while her mom and stepdad watched Wheel of Fortune in the living room. This goes on for a couple months when her stepdad pulls me aside. He's like, you know, we moved out here from Detroit because the boys were teasing Kit so bad. She'd come home crying every day. I'm shaking my head. Nah, she never told me that. Kids can be cruel sometimes. He goes on. It got to the point where I had to wait at her bus stop just to make sure them boys left her alone. I sigh. It's always the pretty ones that get picked on. He's looking at me like I'm stupid. Jude, you never noticed anything different about Kit? Nah, just that I like her a lot. He says real slow and low. You know Kit's mentally challenged. What? Nah, I'm laughing. Come on. I'm serious. She's got the mental capacity of a 3rd grader. I just thought you should know that so you'd do the right thing. I'm nodding, thinking back. That bus we took home together was kind of short, and it did have tinted windows and a chairlift. She did like birds an awful lot. Holy shit, my girlfriend's a retard. The very next day, I did do the right thing. I broke it off with her. It got out that she was slow and people had jokes for me, but how the hell was I supposed to know she was retarded? She wasn't drooling or anything. She's not like retarded. 3 years later, I've dropped 50 pounds, finally got some pussy, started dogging hoes, and I see Kit downtown at some festival. She's with her sister buying a hot dog. She still looks good, midriff showing, pants sagging with the panties out, looking like TLC and shit. I'm thinking if she was like a 3rd grader 3 years ago, her brain's probably in 6th grade by now, and her booty looks like it's in college. Maybe I can fuck. I get her number, tell her I'll call her sometime. A few weeks later, me and Jinx are doing mushrooms. We're driving around Pontiac, tripping balls, trying to holler at bitches, but none of these chicks are messing with us because we're a little too fucked up. We're coming down and we're sitting on the truck, looking up at the stars, talking about the universe and the meaning of life. Jinx is like, I need some pussy. Shit, me too. You got anyone? Just them girls we saw earlier. We were gonna try and fuck with these little hood rats who lived in the knolls, but we had to leave because Jinx's hands had turned into pyramids and started spinning. Then I remember Kit. Hey, I got somebody we can call, and she got a sister. How's she look? Like TLC, dog. We're at the payphone. I call her, say we're coming over. Her mom's got to give me directions because Kit doesn't know how to get to her own house. I tell her to make sure her sister's awake. She says okay. We get lost. It takes an hour to get there. It's 1 a.m. By the time we show up, Kit comes to the door in a prom dress, a pink velvet gown with one shoulder strap and sequins along the sides. On her feet are house shoes. She's alone. I say, where's your sister? She's upstairs. We'll go get her. She busy. Doing what? Sleep. Tough break for Jinx. Being a wingman, sometimes you hit the jackpot and sometimes you crap out. There's been many a time I had to babysit some gorilla-looking bitch while Jinx got a blowjob. So he's going to be riding this one out on the love seat, solo. She puts a movie on in the VCR. Jude, have you ever seen Friday? I love Friday. Yeah, let's watch that shit. She's crouched in front of the television trying to get it to work. On TVs back in the day, you had to have it on channel 3 to play movies. She keeps pressing channel 30. 3-0, static, 3-0, static, 3-0, static. Finally, I say, hey babe, you gotta put it on 3 for the picture. Press 03. She says, nah, I do this all the time, and starts flicking one channel at a time through the dial. She gets all the way to channel 80, gets frustrated, and presses 30 again. Jinx is like, oh, hell nah. I say, hey, Kit, hey, Kit. What? Fuck that movie. Just come over here and kick it with me. She stands, TV still on, snow on the screen, sound buzzing, and sits next to me. I say, girl, we've been here like 15 minutes. I ain't seen you in forever. Ain't you gonna give me a kiss? She looks at me and says, nah, I'm gonna play with my keyboard. She reaches up underneath the couch, pulls out a Casio, hits the demonstration beat, and pretends like she's playing. She's staring at us, smiling the whole time, moving her fingers over the keys. I'm good at it, Jude. I'm good at the keyboard. Jinx is staring at me like, what the fuck? I won't even look at him. Yeah, you're great. Y'all want to see my gerbil? Jinx is like, nah, I don't want to see your gerbil. I'm scared of gerbils. Don't be scared of gerbils. I have a nice gerbil. Nah, I'm good. Don't bring out no gerbil. She drops the Casio, song still playing, goes in the kitchen, comes back with the gerbil, and tosses it on Jinx's lap. See, it's a nice gerbil. Don't be scared. It lands on him and runs up his body. Jinx is hollering. He jumps off the back of the love seat. The gerbil goes flying and scampers across the carpet and under a chair. Kit's on her hands and knees trying to fish it out. Jinx half mouths, half whispers, dog, this bitch is crazy. Let's get the fuck gone. I whisper back, hold up, man. I'm trying to fuck. Jude, man, come on. Give me 10 minutes. He gives me this real disappointed dad look and just shakes his head. Yeah, it's 1 a.m. and I'm trying to fuck a retarded girl wearing house shoes and a prom dress trying to catch a gerbil. So I bet that ass ain't retarded. I ain't say shit to him when he fucked a cripple. I say, Kit, let's go in the kitchen. I think the gerbil ran in there. I get her to follow me, and that's when I put the moves on her, in the kitchen in the dark. I'm kissing on her, and she keeps talking about the fucking gerbil. I'm rubbing her titties, and it's gerbil, gerbil, gerbil. I'm hiking up her dress, and she's like, Jude, what are you doing, Jude? Then I put my hand down her drawers, and she's saying, Jude, that feels funny, Jude, that feels funny. I'm like, hold up, I got something for you. I take my dick out, I touch her pussy, and it's dry as a desert, then it hits me. Usually when I do moves, their pussies are pretty wet by now, and her shit is not wet at all. As a matter of fact, it's probably the driest vagina I've ever felt in my life. Maybe the experts are right. Maybe she is all the way retarded, like retarded. I place my penis back into my trousers, pull her dress back down, and excuse myself. There's a gerbil in this home that needs finding. I'd better leave her to it. We make our way out, and she stays in the kitchen looking for her pet in the dark. Jinx is clowning. I'm just shaking my head, speechless. And when TLC's Creep comes on the radio, Jinx turns it all the way up, and we're laughing. And then, one more. That one was longer than I remember. So this one's a very short micro fiction called Stained. I must have been 3 or 4 at the time. I was little. I remember that. I remember being little and dropping my sister off at school and running errands with my mom. I remember driving in the car with her. J. Giles Band on the radio. My Angel is the Centerfold. That song broke my heart. My dad let me look at porn. I knew what a centerfold was. I remember looking at little golden books in the back seat and kicking my feet to the time of the blinker. I remember the generic aisle in the grocery store and the black and white labels. I remember Rochester Park, the pond there, the creek, the swings, and the monkey bars. They were metal then. My mom took me there to play. I was playing by them in the water when I found my duck egg. It was laying there in the bed of the creek by a cluster of stones. It must have rolled out of some duck's nest. I didn't know that. I thought they just hatched them underwater. I picked it up from the creek. It was brown and bigger than the chickens. I ran and showed it to my mom. We drove back to countryside. I played with my little egg the whole way. I was going to hatch it when I got home. I told it so. We pulled up into the parking lot. I climbed to the front seat, jumped out of the car, and ran up the sidewalk to show my dad the egg I found. He was waiting for us to get there. He came out of the house hollering. He storms right past me and goes for my mom. I follow him. He heads my mom off at the sidewalk. She backs up. He's yelling about something. I don't know what. It's violent. They're in the parking lot. He's standing over her. I keep tugging on him. I'm like, look, Dad, look at this egg I found. Nothing. I keep pestering him. I got it in my head that if he just sees this egg and how cool it is, he won't be mad anymore. He'll stop yelling. He shakes me off. My mom's yelling back now, trying not to cry. I'm scared. I'm begging for him, please, to stop fighting. His back is to me and he's pushing her. We're by the dumpster now, the three of us, out in the middle of the parking lot. Now my mom's crying. I yell, I'm going to count to 3. If you guys don't stop fighting, I'm going to break my duck egg. I hold the egg over my head and count. 1, 2, 3. It's like I'm not even there. I slam the egg on the ground and watch the yolk splatter across the blacktop. It's so orange against the asphalt. There goes my egg. And they kept on fighting till the cops came. Those are, yeah, I was going to do another, but I think those two are kind of, yeah.
Yeah, wow, holy shit. It's funny because like if you had read these, it just said these were like original Josh Sherman pieces. I would have been like, yeah, those are Josh Sherman pieces. No, oh my God, the first one slew me. I'll have to give this a look. There's so many books where I'm like, I need to read this, but this has my interest, and it really does. Like, it's definitely autofiction, and it's definitely especially exactly what you would expect.
Yeah, I was surprised that it came from him. I mean, my friend he reads, but he doesn't read a lot of literary fiction. And I was like, I mean, those are some highlights, but there are several. Those are some of my favorites, but there is like, there are a dozen in there that I think are at least at the same level.
Oh, the first one was so vicious. I was losing it.
know.
I was
I was
laughing
reading it,
so hard.
I'd forgotten some stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, glad I didn't write that one.
When it gets to the part with the TV remote, I just totally lost it. And the ending is so sad, though. That's the thing. That piece, like, yes, it's funny, and it's funny throughout, but that ending really, that takes it up a notch, because you get the full weight of just how like awful, and you get his realization of his like, of just how awful his behavior is. And then you get the swerve to there in the car and the song, because I don't know, it's well structured. It's good.
Yeah, it's dark, and it was like, yeah, and it's like we joke about these things, but that was like that's what it's actually like if you were to do that kind of thing. That's like completely fucking disgusting. So.
Oh God. But anyway, Josh, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm looking forward to your Hot Wheels piece next week.
The last one, the publisher wanted more Hot Wheels in the book. I'm not even joking, and this is it. Fucking done with it after this.
That's it?
It'll be the last Hot Wheels thing. Not that I say, but that I write.
Okay. We'll see. Okay, so next up, we're almost done for the night. Just 2 more pieces left. We have Kiko has some poetry, and then we're going to finish up with something from Rudy. So, sorry, it is Kiko, right? I'm always like, am I pronouncing it right or wrong?
It really doesn't matter, but it's wrong.
Damn it! What is it? It's more like Keko, or I'm?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's more like Keko.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try my damnedest, man. I'm trying my damnedest. Sorry.
Well,
Diego, should I link these?
not really, because they haven't been published.
Roger.
So yeah. So just give me a moment to change the mic and the laptop for sound.
You're a little quiet and a little muffled.
Okay, so do you hear me all right now?
Perfect. That's beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah, because the first time I was talking to you on after the recording, I fucked up my laptop, and now I'm using an very old laptop that doesn't recognize my mic. So yeah, so I'm actually now I have video on one laptop and I have audio on my wife's laptop that doesn't have a camera. So
Right.
yeah, okay.
Okay, it's all
Uh,
yours.
Okay, just give me a moment. Yeah, it's better if you go to the link because as you can hear, the usual disclaimer, my spoken English is fucked up, so please go to the link if you wish to understand anything. Let's go. The first one is called Distray, but I refuse medication, Hell Knocks. I love space. In my memory, yes, I felt it, the joy of belonging to an idea. Take me, fool me. The joy of the first time when, where, how, by what means. I'll finish your imperfections, my dear Commodore. But how's it possible that pixels have multiplied into irrelevance? The death of recognition, the death of understanding, the death of recognition into smoothness. The symbols of the past pronounce, we are great, but how many of us? By what means? In an instant, I knock, you open. Vision cannot process over constellations. So that's the first one, and you hear me all right? I presume it's, yeah, okay, great, thanks. The second one is, as I told Jesse before, it has a bit of elementary school homophobia in there. So it's called, just a moment, how to reference my way out of art and into accomplishment. Load, inverted comma, dollar, inverted comma, comma 8. Searching for dollar, loading, ready. List. All references. Speak my trauma to the world. Go tell it on the internet. Go and tell how Dudikov saved me with his shuriken techniques after they cornered me for the 56th time in 4th grade. A fulfilling dream of killing them all rang in my ears and briefly stopped the killing, although I never really meant to kill anyone, just put those weak bastards back in their pokeballs. But Jerry, that sneaky fucker seconded by Tom, used to relax me after school in 6th grade, although I knew he would have been among that gang that accused me wrongfully of raping a guy on our excursion in 4th grade. And there I was, a fag, not even gay, although I wondered many times, would Plato fancy me? I don't care. My soul is leafy like Bajo's feet in front of Tafarel. Resentment metastasized all through the last synapse. And I hate you, Andrei, the most. Because you lied to me when you told me, in this digital plague, there will be ears to hear the bell. So I turn on my Commodore, who's been here before me, who has never let me down, who's seen things I'll always believe in. Pirates, Barbarian, Laser Squad. One-on-one, I play 3D tennis, Summer Games, World Games, Rockstar ate my hamster, searching for dollar, syntax error, ready. And the last one is called In My Summer Place. And so she killed herself. I'm still young enough to see the cock defiant that are defying gravity, trees that give their ensign green. The pebbles are marvelous, and the yellow ball bouncing, rolling, bouncing over them. Right here. Insects are plenty, each carries a pattern. Your laughter is similar, so I'll take it for the night. The air is full, and it's light. Every trill is as far and gentle as the moon.
So many great coming of age pieces tonight. That second poem, man, that second poem slew me. That's so good. The Pokeball stanza, like the way it goes from basically fantasizing about a school shooting, right, to the Pokeball line, and then to coming home to the Commodore computer, and like the way, oh my God, it's just such a perfect, like efficient encapsulation of like what it was like to be like a moody, shitty teenager who was like distant from their friends. And oh my, I don't know, it's just a really great fucking piece, and such a really like creative way of communicating that too. And the other two are fantastic as well. I wasn't expecting our Halloween show to have so many like brilliant pieces of coming of age writing, but I guess what's scarier than adolescence, right? Not fucking much. Anyway,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks.
so much.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Do those poems have a home yet?
No.
Boy, I know of some place that might, I don't know what the name is, but I know of a place.
I think the initials are M and T, right?
Yeah,
Something
I
like
think
that.
that, yeah, a great symptom, definitely.
Yeah,
It's,
I think you have a big batch to send us when we reopen in December. That's what I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. So December, okay.
So Rudy, as long as your mic is unmuted. Oh, you muted your mic again. I was gonna say, as long as your mic's unmuted.
Oh.
But Rudy, you're up next.
Okay, so I was initially going to read 2 games, 2 200-word RPGs that I wrote, but I think it's more appropriate to read something more Halloweeny. So Hell Houses and Hell are Halloweeny, right? So read a story about Lifesaver.
Cool.
You just get the link here. That's the link. If you open, when the thing opens up, you can go to page 38 if you'd like to follow along, but no obligation, obviously, to follow along. It's a kind of interactive little storybook. Okay, so this story is called Snip. I deputize you, said the voice of the Lord, all the time, in every direction. The flames of hell, which looked exactly like hand-carved set pieces from the Muppet Theater for some reason, were jiggered back and forth horizontally by unseen infernal forces near where Tamsin Snyder was standing. Shackled to her free arm, the one without the curved beam of pink glowing plasm jutting from the wrist, was the scoundrel, Dr. Kermit Gosnell, Baron of the Baron, the third trimester warlord, the flair of Lancaster Avenue, snipper of spines. His scissors, which had tasted the marrow of umpteen infants, were now defunct, smashed by the rock of Jesus Christ, which is a really dumb analogy, Tamsin thought to herself, because Jesus beats everything anyway, even especially paper. Looking at Gosnell's soft, cottony face, which must have been constructed using the lightest shade of brown velvet the creators at the Jim Henson Company could muster, Tamsin was struck by an offhanded thought that wouldn't go away. Was Kermit Gosnell the absentee father of the rapper Drake? Wikipedia on her phone, still 5G vital in hell, which came as no surprise to her, said no, but something else that she couldn't touch or scroll said yes. The address of his raided Philly clinic was, after all, 3801, which rolled off the tongue a lot like 4301, the Toronto area housing complex mentioned in Drake's Pop Style track. This sounded like some 3801 shit, Tamsin repeated to herself over and over again as she dragged Kermit, his oversized, expressive mouth still foaming and boasting and blaspheming even now, towards the forever penitentiary, where his sinful essence would be prodded with demonic pitchforks. The judge, given the bad doctor's crimes against creation itself, had shown no mercy, and Kermit Gosnell, fucking heinous butcher man, sinner man, butcher man, guy, a soul so cosmically young as the soul of any man, his reprobate soul was tried as an adult. They had thrown the book of life right at this shitbird, and that was awesome. The sentence, total annihilation. As she tugged, Tamsin could see Kermit's puppeteer, black-clad and nearly inscrutable against the backdrop of spiritual darkness that was hell's geography, stumbling along, struggling to animate his trips, falls, and mouthy apostasy. Chapter 2. Eventually, a huge demon with a prick that looked like the Orbinaut from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 emerged from a crevice and walked alongside the group while occasionally flexing its muscles. Need some help with this buck, young lady? It asked in a voice of fire that was David Koresh's Shoshana Heem, interpreted through Michael Jackson, reinterpreted through Abilify Euphoria. The demon did a little jig, and its attached black men moved cotton and fleece in a set of intricate steps that entrancingly tweened together Jim Crow era buck dance and the gangster lean. Something about the hell spawn put Tamsin on edge. It was either the clip-clop of cloven hooves resounding into the void, or the fact that the demon was appropriating so gratuitously from African Americans with its preternatural flyness. Each foot stomp, a cultural jack move. She wasn't sure which. She brandished the weapon tethered to her arm, Lifesaver, which contained the pure souls of all the babies Gosnell had snuffed, and some 860,300 more. The creature howled and recoiled from the neon light of life, but still kept pace with the march towards annihilation. Soon it was a million devil man march, with all manner of imps, goat men, and insubstantial temptations. Temptations eventually became flesh, or some close facsimile, and, with mouths guided by their shadowy animators, began lip syncing to Just My Imagination as it played from literally everywhere. Shackled petitioners, the dogs, the idolaters, the sorcerers, shuffled along on the periphery, lending backup doo-wops. When at last they reached the frigid ninth circle of hell, Tamsin knew in her heart of hearts, and remembered in her head of heads, mostly from community college classics courses, that Satan was near. The chorus of oldies ceased as she approached the Morning Star's icy crater, the sides of which were lined with jail cells that formed a panopticon. Tamsin, for some time, spoke with all three of Satan's faces, gesturing wildly with her blade. Its stray light illuminated some of the typicalities of prison existence. Dudes getting big, lifting the heaviest things they could find. In this case, the weight of their sins and the absence of God's love. Transsexuals, pouty-lipped and inscrutably gendered, vying for the coveted title of Snow Queen of the cell block. A deserted law library with one copy of the good book. She tried to give the multicolored faces equal time and attention, even though they were all Lucifer. She sure wasn't about to be accused of being a racist. She just wanted to make sure a charge was punished appropriately. Gosnell, meanwhile, openly wept. Ooh, I'm gonna fuck his ass. Nigga, nigga, nigga! Give me a kiss, bitch nigga. Give me a smack, homo thug. I'd give him the same care I'd give my daughter. Giggity, giggity. Ha! Oh yeah, I'll make him my daughter. Older than 15, I'm a raper. These were all the things screamed into the prison noise maelstrom as inmates held unsilent auctions for the unrepentant abortionist's parts. But the orders of the judge were clear. Kermit Gosnell's soul was too evil to live on, even in one of hell's jail cells where he would probably be fucked up the ass every single damn day. Well, get it over with then, Satan's crimson face lisped. Chapter 3. The preparation for soul execution was rote. Gosnell's pupils simply dilated until his whole body fell into their blackness, and then he was gone from sight. Hell's dark folds closed in around Tamsin, like black bars in a video game cutscene. Thousands of red eyes stared at her, the center of attention. She twitched, then lurched involuntarily forward, pointing at herself with a completely humbled, moi-like expression on her face. Were two things, she said. Inside her irreducibly complex mind's eye, she imagined the fear, the self-hatred, the so bad it was just red abstraction level of body loathing that these women, victims rent by Gosnell's knife, must have felt. She imagined being in their bodies, and by a miracle, she was. Tamsin looked down to find herself in labor. Not the toil of zealotry that she was used to. No, she found herself like pregnant as shit, water broken, hospital gown and brow soaked with fluids, legs spread open on an operating table where a bright light shone down on her distended belly. Those demons who didn't bolt immediately were bathed in the cascading glow and incinerated. Dust from their immolations wafted across the room, soiling everything with sooty particulates. The negative space between light and dust was occupied by the form of a man, distinguishable only because he was framed by the pollution. He reached dirty mitts into Tamsin. She ululated. He withdrew. Boy, the figure boomed, laying an infant across her chest. Tamsin sat up, cradling the child. It looked like a miniature version of Kermit Gosnell, but with no strings attached. It jiggled and squirmed in her grasp like small gelatin naturally saw, and she wondered what talented puppeteer was lending it movement. Ventral locomotion? Oh, Tamsin thought, remembering God and his tests. Pop quizzes, really. She anticipated the scissors before she saw them, but the sound of their radical empathy, snip, was still a system shock. Well, I guess technically it was more like a bioshock, where a maniacal father figure holds a woman with weird powers captive and subjects her to narrative seasoning trauma, kind of like an alternate reality version of Earth where torturing animals actually does make the meat taste better. Meat. As the dusty man threw the rusty instruments into baby Kermit's back, Tamsin let out a cry. Why? Fucking, I don't know, he said before redimming the house lights. Rip. The prison observed a moment of silence, which lasted until a massive goat-headed woman kicked the wan little husk of Dr. Kermit B. Gosnell into a frozen pit with spikes and said, "Let's fucking party." Chapter 4. It stands to reason that Tamsin Snyder did not merely walk out of hell. Satan would have to have been off of his gourd to let the sword maiden of the pro-life movement leave his domain alive. As she emerged from the tundra into sulfurous heat, 6 billion demons assailed her. Out of respect for the laws of Newtonian physics, which still exist in hell, and the laws of fandom, which might, I don't know, she didn't kill all of them. But as felt-suited curmudgeons catcalled from the gallery demanding aesthetic destruction, swaths of pinkish light washed over the dreadscape like a real rain, which was needed because the place was pretty dry. Black suits worked like they were employed by 3-letter agencies, positioning their marionettes for slaughter. Tamsin heard strings and poles snapping as the lifesaver sundered them with her deliberate slices, leaving carnage, but no gore, as per her very PG-rated perception of her own violence. Demons that died exploded in puffs with stuffing and pipe cleaners, and on the rare occasions where she did extinguish a black suit, who she presumed to be flesh and blood, the remains were left tastefully dismembered dollops of hot, glowing fetal essence cauterizing any encroachments of strawberry. It sure was a heck of a mess. Her time in hell ended like it began. Gates were passed through, yes, and God's voice was mixed with probably a dozen others who used clinical language and insulted her intelligence, even though intelligence denotes a bullshit concept sustained by modern psychiatry and dudes who want to be B.F. Skinner but lack a pigeon and a great war. At some point, Tamsin Snyder was in her pajamas. At some point, she was sitting down and swishing pills around a paper cup. At some point, she was doing a worksheet. At some point, she was doing homework from a correspondence course. At some point, she was laying down, no, laying, no, lying. At some point, she was lying. That's it.
So I've read this a couple of times and I've heard you read it before, but it still hits. It still hits hard. I love the like wonderful like slapstick and the wordplay and everything. I will tell you something, man, though. Those DMX lyrics hit a little different this time around.
Yeah.
Especially given that they're spoken in hell, right? Like you hear
Yeah.
it, you're like the first couple of times I heard it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like a demon quoting DMX in hell. Now it's like, is it
I was like,
DMX in hell? You know?
yeah.
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 F.
No. F.
That was great,
Chat for
man.
DMX.
Sorry, I think I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I just said F's in the chat for DMX.
Yeah, F's in the chat for DMX for sure. And I think that's it. I think that's where we're going to end the reading tonight. I don't think we have time to do an open mic tonight. It's getting a little on the later side, and I do have to travel tomorrow. But I will leave the Zoom call up for a little bit here, so if people want to bullshit chat, whatever they can. But if you're watching at home, this has been. I always say at home as if anyone is anywhere else. But if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, this has been Misery Loves Company. It's a weekly reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive authors to share their work. And if you would like to do this, anyone's welcome to come, anyone's welcome to lurk, anyone's welcome to read. We tweet out the link about, 7:45, 15 minutes before the show starts, from @miserytourism.com, and we start at around 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, that's the whole thing. If you want to come next week, you want to watch this thing live, fucking do it. That's what I'm saying. Okay, fuck it. We are done here. Have a happy Halloween, everyone.